Ms. Holmes, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
This is Elizabeth Holmes, once the youngest female self-made billionaire. In this never-before-aired deposition, she sits across from 12 attorneys under investigation for an alleged years-long fraud.
Did it concern you that a number of tests weren't working on Theranos' devices?
Now facing up to 20 years in prison, it's a stunning fall from grace for the woman who was once poised to change the world.
This is a revolutionary company that threatens to change healthcare.
If she had made this work, she would have been the next Steve Jobs.
We've made it possible to eliminate the tubes and tubes of blood.
Her technology promised to run hundreds of tests from a tiny finger prick, a promise she would never fulfill.
This is not fake it till you make it. This thing's a product that didn't work.
Did Ms. Holmes know that Theranos could not do all those tests?
She knew.
It's a story of greed, and it's a story of incredible deception.
It all started here at Stanford University, the birthplace of so many tech icons.
In Silicon Valley, one of the things that people brag about is that they drop out of college. Steve Jobs dropped out of college, Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of college, Bill Gates dropped out of college.
After less than 2 years here, Elizabeth dropped out too.
I was at a point where another few classes in chemical engineering was not necessary for what I wanted to do.
In 2003, she launched her company, which she would come to name Theranos.
It's about keeping that conviction in yourself.
Elizabeth wanted nothing less than to be the Apple of healthcare. Insiders say she was obsessed with Steve Jobs and that she wanted to mimic him at every turn, from those signature black turtlenecks to recruiting his former head of software, Avi Tevanian.
This seems like a really bright young lady who is very driven, has a really interesting idea.
But he quickly started seeing red flags.
She'd prick her finger, and then she would put blood on something, and then she'd put it in the machine, and then sometimes she would say, this part doesn't work anymore, which was a little bit odd. But some of that you expect, again, from a startup that has a product that's not done, right? But the problem was it never got any better.
Avi quit after a year, but Elizabeth kept going, eventually getting an enormous loan from a former software executive named Sunny Balwani.
I think it was about $20 million.
But Sunny, a flashy entrepreneur who drove a Porsche 911 and a black Lamborghini, wasn't just offering a lifeline. He was also joining Theranos as COO.
Did he have any qualifications in the lab testing business?
He did not.
Or in pathology or anything like that?
Not to my knowledge.
He seemed an odd choice to employees, but he became Elizabeth's number 2, and together they went after their biggest collaboration yet, with Walgreens, as seen here in this Theranos tweet.
Walgreens at that point had more than 8,000 stores in the US, so you can imagine that the Theranos blood test would have been available at almost every street corner.
So they cut a $140 million deal. On the heels of that news, she assembled an all-star board of government heavyweights.
The piece that really vaulted her to fame and stardom was the cover story in Fortune magazine.
The article states that Theranos offers more than 200 blood tests without a syringe. But precisely how Theranos accomplishes all these amazing feats is a trade secret.
You saw her almost once a week, either gracing a magazine cover or attending a tech conference or a healthcare conference or going on TV.
Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos.
Elizabeth Holmes. Elizabeth Holmes.
Thank you for having me. I am so incredibly humbled.
We did this.
You founded this company 12 years ago, right? Yeah. Tell them how old you were.
I was 19.
By 2014, Theranos is valued at nearly $10 billion. The founders of Walmart invest $150 million, media mogul Rupert Murdoch $125 million, and the DeVos family, including now Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, another $100 million. But for all the hype on the outside, on the inside, things weren't going as planned. Employees like Erica Chung were dealing with a product that still wasn't working.
At what point do you start to think something isn't right here?
I think the transition happened is when I started processing patient samples.
So you basically start out with a base test.
Yep, and it kept failing. I kept running it over and over and over. And how it was handled, it totally blew me away. They took out data points.
So you're saying essentially that you were cherry picking
exactly
the information.
Right, but the thing is we were still processing patients.
Patients like Sherry Ackert.
This is the Walgreens where I had the infamous blood draw.
As a breast cancer survivor, Sherry needed to get tested regularly. But things took a terrifying turn when she got her results.
I saw that the estradiol amount was over 300. I called my oncologist's office and the nurse called me back and she said, "I am so sorry, that's not good. There could be a tumor growing somewhere." I will never forget that day.
The doctor told Sherry to go in for more tests, but this time recommended a non-Theranos lab.
It was about a week later, I got the call from my doctor and he said, "Congratulations, your estrogen is basically non-existent."
The Theranos tests had been off by hundreds of points.
No one from Theranos ever called me to apologize. No one. Not okay.
So many inside the walls of Theranos say they were too scared to speak up. But there was one unlikely whistleblower willing to take the risk, a research engineer named Tyler Schultz. He also happened to be the grandson of former Secretary of State George Schultz, a board member at Theranos.
You also said that Ms. Holmes was manipulative. What do you mean by that?
She's really good at telling you what you need to hear to keep going. She definitely did that a lot with my grandfather. She would just like feed him things that were just completely factually not true.
People can come in and do full-service laboratory testing with a stick from a finger, as opposed to having the tubes and tubes taken from your arm.
Can you recall any of the factually not true things that Ms. Holmes told you?
The big ones are being able to run hundreds of blood tests from a single drop of blood. My grandfather would go get a Theranos test done and he would have a needle in his arm. You know, it's like, well, I thought this was a single drop of blood. And there'd be some, excuse about why they needed to take a venous draw for him, but, for everybody else, it's a finger prick, and he continued to buy into that. They weren't even running most of the tests on the Theranos devices. While I was working there, we only ran 7 tests on the Theranos devices. And most of the tests were being run on third-party machines.
Did Ms. Holmes know at the time that Theranos could not do all those tests?
She knew.
Of the few tests they were running on Theranos devices, Tyler says the results were often not accurate.
I think at the end of the day, everyone was concerned that we weren't giving patients the right results.
Tyler eventually decided he would raise his issues directly with the CEO herself. Elizabeth responded by email later that evening.
She writes, "Tyler, these are very, very serious comments and allegations you're making." And then she says that she's going to have the teams go through this line by line, so it'll take some time before I get back to you on this.
But rather than a follow-up from Elizabeth, he received this email from Sunny Balwani. That reckless comment based on absolute ignorance is so insulting to me that had any other person made these statements, we would have held them accountable in the strongest way. The only reason I have taken so much time away from work to address this personally is because you are Mr. Schultz's grandson. The only email on this topic I want to see from you going forward is an apology. Instead, Tyler gave his 2 weeks' notice. He says he went to go meet with his grandfather at his home later that day.
Tyler tried to make him realize that this was a fraud, and his grandfather had sided with Elizabeth Holmes and didn't believe him.
He said, "They're trying to convince me that you're stupid, but they can't do that. They can, however, convince me that you're wrong. And in this case, I do believe you're wrong." And My grandfather said that the Theranos devices were currently being used in medevac helicopters.
He said that?
He said that.
Did he tell you who had told him that?
He didn't say who told him that, but I have a really good guess. He also said they were being used in operating rooms. I remember saying that that couldn't possibly be true because the devices were barely working within the walls of Theranos.
Having made no progress with his grandfather, Tyler eventually took his concerns to Wall Street Journal investigative reporter John Carreyrou. Carreyrou authored the first of many explosive articles in the Wall Street Journal that stated, among other claims, that the company isn't using its technology for all the tests it offers, but instead was using traditional machines bought from companies like Siemens to run the majority of its tests. Following the article, a defiant Elizabeth appeared on Mad Money with Jim Cramer.
This is what happens when you work to change things, and first they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world.
Elizabeth continued to deny. But when we come back, under the harsh glare of a different kind of spotlight, she'd find it harder to avoid the mounting evidence.
I know that we made mistakes.
And for the first time ever, you'll hear from the defense attorney for the COO of Theranos. Stay with us.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.